Good evening, everyone. My name is Ani Migdal, and I had the immeasurable pleasure, as well as the daunting task, of translating Tatьяна Толстая's Aetherial Worlds, a collection of 18 stories that Tatьяна will be reading from a little later. But before I go on, there's a confession I must make. The reason I'm standing here tonight is nepotism, pure and simple. You see, Tatьяна is my mother-in-law and the grandmother of my two children. In fact, my daughter Alice should be somewhere over there. There she is. Hi, Alice. But that's not all. My parents' friendship with Tatьяна and her siblings goes back to their youth. My grandfather and Tatьяna's father, to whom Aetherial Worlds is dedicated, were also friends. Our roots go deep and intertwine throughout 3 generations. I know many of the people that Tatьяна mentions in this collection. I've been to many of the places that she describes. Hopefully, this does not make me the Jared Kushner of translating. As a Russian speaker, it is somewhat strange to be tasked with introducing Tatьяна Толстая. In Russia, she needs no introductions. As a regular presence on TV, she's a host, or she used to be a host of a talk show, as well as being one of the most revered and celebrated authors of her generation. She's recognized on the street wherever she goes. However, Aetherial Worlds is the first English translation of Tatьяna's work in 20 years. It's not that there hadn't been offers to publish during this time. Tatьяна simply didn't have a translator whom she trusted enough to do it. The brilliant Jamie Gambrell, who used to work with Tatьяна before me, was no longer available, and so Tatьяna's books in Russian piled up, but no one had the opportunity to read them in English. And this actor slash musician slash budding writer just had to change that. See, that's part 2 of my confession. I'm not really a translator. Tatьяna and I had previously collaborated on some translations of plays together, most notably of Last Summer in Chulimsk, a gorgeous play by Alexandra Vampilov that no one in the English language-speaking world knows about yet, and Chekhov's 3 Sisters. But I had never translated prose or poetry. And then one fine day, out of the blue, Tatьяna sent me Smoke and Shadows, which is in the collection, and said, "Why don't you give it a go? You're good at this." Encouraged by such a strong vote of confidence from an author for whom I had bottomless admiration, I began my personal exploration of the Dunning-Kruger effect. You guys know what that is, right? That's when people of low ability suffer from delusions of superiority. Well, let me tell you, it was a hard and long slog to metacognition. Working on this first story was painfully humbling. My respect and awe of Tatьяna's genius grew with each sentence I struggled to translate. It's hard to convey my euphoria when after several long months of torment, Tatьяna read my first draft and liked it, or my relief when the folks at the Iowa Review also liked it enough to publish it. Then Tatьяna sent me some more stories that were subsequently published in the New Yorker, and then a bunch more, and now here we are, 3 years later, with the collection finally out. Tatьяna's writing is seamless, tightly interweaving allegory, humor, cultural commentary, poetry, and slang. She often writes in the first person, and often about things that are personal to her. She fearlessly lays bare her soul and then ingeniously covers her tracks with a punchline. We both knew from the beginning that it would be impossible to simply translate all of these elements from the Russian. I needed to find parallels in English that carried the same linguistic and cultural connotations. I needed to find a way to convey not only the surface meaning, but also the undercurrents that Tatьяna had built into each and every sentence. But nepotism to the rescue, Tatьяna generously agreed to go over every single word of each draft to make sure nothing was lost in translation. And so this English version of Aetherial Worlds is a true collaboration. I would work on a draft, and once it was ready, I'd send it to Tatьяna, and we discuss the nuances of every idiom, every metaphor, and every curse word. Now, this is because, as every Russian speaker knows, Russian profanity is an art form which takes a lifetime to master. The breadth of permutations is staggering and ever-growing. By contrast, the offerings in English feel paltry and restricted to just a few choice words, I'm sorry to say. I know we got the poetry right, but it's the expletives that keep me up at night. Now, I realize that Tatьяна rather enjoys the anonymity that coming to the US affords her, but I hope that she will get as wide an audience here as she has in Russia. Her work changes you on a cellular level when you read it. Her voice deserves to be, expletive deleted, heard. Thank you very much, and without further ado, Татьяна Толстая.
Good evening. Hello. I will read two short stories from this collection, from the collection of Aetherial Worlds. The first story opens the collection, and it's called 2020. My grandfather, Alexei Tolstoy, a famous Russian writer, attended the St. Petersburg Technological Institute in his youth, starting in 1901, thinking he would like to become an engineer, but he never became one. He described to my father how difficult it was for him studying there. Here is his professor by the blackboard addressing the students. Let's picture a cigar-like object, and that's it. My young grandpa is in a trance. He is picturing something cigar-like. He sees a cigar. You need to clip the end of it before you can smoke it. Golden cutters carefully trim away the dry brown leaves. What wonderful aroma wafts from quality Havana tobacco. Out of nowhere appears a balloon-shaped brandy snifter full of heavy red-brown cognac, casting golden reflections. Oh, to grasp the glass in your palm, warming it, the undulating golden flickers, the bluish smoke, you inhale it, you tap the cigar to break off the ash. It's dusk, the heavy drapes drawn back. Outside, through the window, there is a crepuscular early evening on snowy St. Petersburg streets. A sleigh pulled by a courser silently whooshes by. Who's rushing and where? To the theater? To a romantic rendezvous? Suddenly, reality interrupts this waking dream. Cheers thunder, the professor erases the blackboard, wiping away formulas interesting and useful to any engineer. See you next time, gentlemen. Grandfather never finished his studies at the institute. He committed himself wholly to literature, becoming famous for, among other things, his historical novels. Writers who knew him personally described his imagination in the later years as clairvoyant. He was able to improvise, creating on the fly the most complicated dialogues, keeping them psychologically astute and peppering them with convincing historical specifics. He saw the past in great detail, every button on a jacket, every wrinkle in a dress. This ability to daydream was passed on to me, although not to the same extent. I didn't start out a writer and had no plans of becoming one. Although I happily swam in imaginary expanses, I had no words to describe them. Then, one fine day, when I was 32 years old, I decided to correct my myopia by undergoing surgery in the famous eye clinic of Professor Fedorov. This was in 1983, before they used lasers for the procedure, as they do now, but instead made corneal incisions by hand with a regular razor blade. The incisions took 3 long months to heal. All this time, while the eyes recuperated, you could see things only poorly, approximately, through tears that constantly streamed like rain on the window pane. And after it was over, one day you'd literally wake up with perfect vision, 20/20. But before that happened, you had to sit in complete darkness. Such were the idiosyncrasies of the process that any light caused unsufferable eye pain. At first, for 3 or 4 days, the agony was so great that no analgesics, no sleeping pills brought any relief. Then it subsided a bit. Nonetheless, even at dusk, my eyes were ablaze, and the temporary respite of night was interrupted by accidental glances at the stars, their light burning like fiery needles. Finally, it was all I could do, sit at home wearing dark sunglasses, the black drapes closed, living by touch. Not a single word, neither handwritten nor typed, did my eyes take in during that prison sentence. Only music, invisible in its essence, saved me from this existential desert. All that was left of the world was music and pain. Gradually, something unfamiliar began to happen to my mind. The blindness was still near total. I didn't yet dare take off my sunglasses to peer outside, but in my mind's eye, I began to see bright visions from my past. They were not simply visions as before, similar to dreams. No, these were words, phrases, pages of text, plot lines. It was as if someone awoke in my head, a second me, one who had been slumbering until now. Visual experiences now came with a narrative. In fact, they were inseparable from it. If the wording wasn't exact, then the imagery it conjured seemed obscured by dust or fog, and only the right words cleared it away. I was seeing my childhood. Our neighbor who lived on the other side of the fence and whom I had long forgotten. I was 6 when he was 60. Never before could he have been interesting to me. And why him specifically? No matter. Suddenly I saw him. I understood his life. I felt his anxiety and his joy. Suddenly his house, his garden, his beautiful but not so young Tsarina of a wife appeared before me. And with these images, words emerged. Words that could describe them. A plot line materialized and filled up with meaning. Unexpectedly, the subtext and hidden significance of this yet-to-be-written story appeared, the eternal metaphor of banishment from paradise. My external eyes were still awaiting the sunrise, while my internal ones were looking around, seeking out details. Here is one, here is another, here is a whole bunch. As soon as I was able to emerge from my room into the dim light of the table lamp, I typed up my first ever short story in great haste. I knew just how to do it, what to write, what not to write, and I understood that what remains unwritten possesses a special kind of power, a certain gravity by absence, similar to a magnetic force that can both attract and repel, a force we can't see, but that is nonetheless there. This heretofore invisible, hidden world was now within my reach. I could enter it at any point, but it had particular doors, with keys of sound, with lockpicks of intonation. The doors could be opened with love or with tears. One day, all of a sudden, my sliced-up eyes could see again. My vision returned completely and immediately, 20/20, as promised. And this was bliss. Meanwhile, I found that the second world, having first appeared to me in darkness, was here to stay. It turned out to be a multifaceted underside of so-called reality, a dungeon full of treasure, an ethereal world through the looking glass, a mysterious box with passcodes to all enigmas, an address book with the exact coordinates of those who never existed. I don't know its geography, its mountains, or its seas. It is so vast, it must be limitless. Or perhaps it's not simply one world. Perhaps there are many. They are unpredictable. They can show themselves to you or not. Some days they may not let you inside. Sorry, the doors are locked. We're on holiday. But to the patient and the devoted, they will in the end always yield. The doors will open, and you won't know what you will come across until you enter. And the second story is called Aspic. Yeah, I know Americans don't like Aspic. We do, but it's not so simple. The matter is not so simple. Truth be told, I've always been afraid of it, since childhood. It's prepared not casually or whenever the fancy strikes you, but most often for New Year's Eve, in the heart of winter, in the shortest and most brutal days of December. Darkness comes early. There is a damp frost. You can see spiky halos around the street lamps. You have to breathe through your mittens. Your forehead aches from the cold and your cheeks are numb. But wouldn't you know it, you still have to boil and chill the aspic. The name of the dish itself makes the temperature of your soul drop, and no thick gray goat hair shawl will save you. It's a special kind of religion, making the aspic. It's a yearly sacrifice, though we don't know to whom or for what. And what would happen if you don't make it is also a question mark. But for some reason, it must be done. You must walk in the cold to the market. It is always dim there, never warm there. Past the tubs with pickled things, past the cream and the creme fraiche redolent of girlish innocence, past the artillery depot of potatoes, radishes, and cabbages, past the hills of fruit, past the signal lights of clementines to the farthest corner. That's where the chopping block is. That's where the blood and the axe are. Call Russia to the axe. To this one right here, digging its blade into a wooden stump. Russia is here. Russia is picking out a piece of meat. Igor, chop up the legs for the lady. Igor lifts his axe. Hack. Lays out the white cow knees. Cleaves the shanks. Some buy pieces of the muzzle, lips and nostrils. And those who like pork broth, they get little pig feet with baby hooves. Holding one of those, touching its yellow skin is creepy. What if it suddenly shook your hand in return? None of them are really dead. That's the conundrum. There is no death. They are hacked apart, mutilated. They won't be walking anymore, or even crawling. They've been killed, but they are not dead. They know that you've come for them. Next, it's time to buy something dry and clean, onions, garlic, roots, and herbs. And back home through the snow you go, crunch, crunch. The frosty building entryway. The light bulb has been stolen again. You fumble in the dark for the elevator button. Its red eye lights up. First, the intestines appear in the elevator's wrought iron cage, then the cabin itself. Our ancient St. Petersburg lifts are slow. They click as they pass each floor, testing our patience. The chopped up legs in the shopping bag are pulling your arm down, and it seems as if at the very last moment they'll refuse to get into the elevator. They'll twitch, break free, and run away, clacking across the ceramic tile. Clippity-clap, clippity-clap, clippity-clap. Maybe that would be for the best? No, it's too late. At home, you wash them and throw them into the pot. You set the burner on high. Now it's boiling, raging. Now the surface is coated with gray, dirty ripples. All that's bad, all that's weighty, all that's fearful, all that suffered, darted and tried to break loose, oinked and mooed, couldn't understand, resisted and gasped for breath. All of it turns to muck. All the pain and all the death are gone, congealed into repugnant, fluffy felt. Finito. Placidity, forgiveness. Then it's time to dump this dead water, to thoroughly rinse the sedated pieces under a running faucet, and to put them back into a clean pot filled with fresh water. It's simply meat, simply food. All that was fearsome is gone. A calm blue flower of propane, just a little bit of heat. Let it simmer quietly. This is a 5 to 6 hour undertaking. While it cooks, you can take your time preparing the herbs and the onions. You'll be adding them to the pot in 2 batches. First, 2 hours before the broth finishes cooking, and then again an hour later. Don't forget to stir in plenty of salt, and your labor is done. By the end of the cooking cycle, there will have been a complete transfiguration of flesh. The pot will be a lake of gold with fragrant meat, and nothing will remind us of Igor. The kids are here. They are looking at the pot, unafraid. It's safe to show them this soup. They won't ask any tough questions. Stain the broth, pull the meat apart, slice it with a sharp knife, as they did in the olden days, in the age of the Tsar, and the other Tsar, and the third Tsar, before the advent of the meat grinder, before Vasily the Blind, and Ivan Kalita, and the Cumans, and Rurik, and Cineas, and Truvor, who, as it turns out, never even existed. Set up the bowls and the plates, and place some fresh-pressed garlic in each one. Add the chopped-up meat. Use the ladle to pour over it some thick, golden, gelatinous broth. And that's that. Your job is done. The rest is up to the frost. Carefully take the bowls and plates out to the balcony. Cover the coffins with lids. Stretch some plastic wrap over them and wait. Might as well stay out on the balcony, bundled up in your shawl. Smoke a cigarette and look up at the winter stars, unable to identify a single one. Think about tomorrow's guests. Remind yourself that you need to iron the tablecloth, to add sour cream to the horseradish, to warm the wine and chill the vodka, to grate some cold butter, to place the sauerkraut in a dish, to slice some bread, to wash your hair, to dress up, to do your makeup, foundation, mascara, lipstick. And if you feel like senselessly crying, do it now, while nobody can see you. Do it violently, about nothing and for no reason, sobbing, wiping away your tears with your sleeve, stubbing out your cigarette against the railing of the balcony, not finding it there, and burning your fingers. Because how to reach this there and where this there is, no one knows.
Hi, everyone. Hello. Thank you both again. I have a question, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience. If you have a question, please stand up and speak up so that we can all hear you. It really struck me that both of your work seem to deal with how we use memories to sort of like find a vision or a story for ourselves, and also a vision for the future. So I was wondering if there is a specific kind of memory that you think is, or that you find useful for writing, or when writing.
It's a question for me?
For both of us.
Both of us.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this novel of mine is, people believe that it is about the future, but it is not a real future in the sense of science fiction. But I just observe the now, now time, our time, and in the time in which we are living, there is a hidden future, and that's the time of my novel, I think.
For me, the memory as an idea, as the ability to keep memories and to travel through them is extremely important, because I don't see any future as such. I never think about future. I don't even imagine future, except for some obvious, what will happen next summer, tomorrow, all these little things, but not really. I don't think about it. But I do think about the past all the time, and the more I get into it, the more interesting it becomes. I can travel through past. So for me, it's just a very dear thing to do.
Anyone has a question? Go ahead.
I wonder if you could both tell us about the function of humor in your work.
The function of humor.
A function of humor. The humor of part of my nature, so I don't have to put it, It is everywhere. And when you are thinking about one question, for example, pollution or the serious problem, if you don't have humor, you have only two options, yes or no, But the humor opens the space, bigger space to think. It's the space for imagination and free associations. That is the humor need not to concentrate for the decision A or B or no or yes, but to open your mind, I think.
Yeah, I cannot but agree. I would perhaps add that imagine if there were no humor in the text, or just in conversation or in life, it would be impossible. Everything is so serious and so sad. It's better not to live if you have no humor, I guess. And also, I think that humor is what differs us from animals. So animals are wonderful, but they don't have humor. So perhaps that's what stopped them from turning into thinking and creatures, and those who really suffer and or laugh the way we do. Okay, so that's perhaps it.
Do you have something to add? Yeah. Well, how about this? Can you think of any other worlds or times or landscapes that you want to write about in the future? You don't have to answer it.
Well, they just appear. They come. The imaginary landscapes come from, I wouldn't say from nowhere. There is a place from where they do come. Sometimes they are they come in your dreams, which are based in turn on something you already saw, but something maybe they are based on what you are going to see. So the time sometimes goes in the opposite direction, but I see things all the time. I know I have a kind of a strange ability, like a disease of a sort. Very often, many times a day, I find myself both in this place and in some other place. I see places, I find myself there, and I even feel myself a different person. But I'm not crazy now.
Now, I don't want to write about the landscape in the future because it must be the changing the landscapes, changing climate, and it's a kind of tragedy for me. But I want to write about the language in the future. The language is changing, and what about the English language in 100 years, or the German, or maybe the English language become very simple language, that you're so simple grammar that everyone can learn it in 3 days. Or maybe the German language is changing because of many refugees. It's mixed with Arabic or other languages, and it became another language, and it will be the interesting subject for me. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Happy birthday, and we'll see you at the signing.
Not yet.